This week's Irish Farmers Journal podcast is brought to you by MartBids, your new free-to-download app providing farmers with the details of every animal before it enters the sales ring. MartBids. Trade smarter. Trade safer.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Hannah Quinn Mulligan. Coming up on the show this week, the loan saga continues and we ask Minister Humphreys when we can expect the 300 million scheme.
Obviously we have to bring it through the Houses of the Oireachtas and get approval there, but I hope to do that as quickly as possible, because obviously this loan will provide for a gap in the marketplace where people can borrow, or businesses can borrow, up to €3 million.
And it seems that 2018 will continue to be remembered for all the wrong reasons, as Teagasc issue a stark warning on farm income estimates.
But unfortunately, when we fast forward then into the present age, 2018, it's been a negative news story in terms of cost of production and milk output value. So what that means for our Irish farmers and at the farm gate is that we're looking at declines in family farm income across dairy, beef, sheep and cereals.
But first, Enterprise Ireland launched their International Markets Week on Wednesday, and I was there to doorstep Minister for Business and Enterprise Heather Humphreys to find out when legislation would be enacted for this long-awaited low-cost loan scheme that was promised in Budget 2018 and repackaged and re-promised in Budget 2019 last week.
Minister Humphreys, up to €300 million announced in budget last week for low-cost loans. Any idea on the legislation and how that's going?
Yes, well, I have brought the heads of bill to Cabinet, and we will be bringing forward the legislation as a matter of urgency, and I want to see it completed by the end of the year, so we're ready to launch this new 300 million long-term loan in early January. So obviously we have to bring it through the Houses of the Oireachtas and get approval there, but I hope to do that as quickly as possible, because obviously this loan will provide for a gap in the marketplace where people can borrow, or businesses can borrow, up to €3 million, and the minimum loan is 50,000. It's over a long-term period, which is banks normally lend out to 7 years. This will be for loans up to 8 to 10 years. So it really will be very welcome in terms of businesses that want to plan for the future and protect themselves against the effects of Brexit.
Additional money was announced as well for customs facilities. Is it looking now that a customs check along the border is inevitable no matter what the Brexit deal will be?
As I say, what we want is a backstop agreement where there are no borders on between us and Northern Ireland, and that's very clear, and we will continue, and that is our priority, and we have support right across the EU in terms of the backstop agreement, and we continue to be part of a very strong group of the EU 27, and we're part of that negotiating group.
Minister Heather Humphreys there. And Minister for Agriculture Michael Creed has said that the part of the scheme that will be aimed at farmers will focus on young and new entrant farmers, specifically for capital investment. Now, many farmers are frustrated with low beef prices at the moment, and the Irish Cattle and Sheep Association have held their second blockade this week outside Dawn Meats in Ballyhaunis. And on top of this, recent reports on climate change still highlight cows as a main contributor to carbon emissions. But how do farmers in other parts of the world contend with low beef prices and the climate debate? Our correspondent Thomas Hubert met with Canadian farmer Christine Tapley, and she explained to him a new industry initiative in Canada that pays farmers extra for greener beef.
Yeah, I'm a beef producer in Canada, so I have a cow-calf operation there. But then I also work off-farm in the conservation. So I work for Ducks Unlimited Canada on grassland sustainability and grassland conservation in Canada, and how that interacts with the beef industry. And then my role here, I actually am a counsellor on the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef.
And we are here at the Global Roundtable on Sustainable Beef, which is this gathering of farmers, processors, NGOs looking at how you can improve the record of the industry. There was a lot of discussion about what's happening in Canada, and there is a scheme you're working on yourself that's been helping show what's being done in terms of better sustainable beef production and returning some money to the farmers. How does that work?
Yeah, so it's a system that we've been working on for quite a while now. The Roundtable was formed in 2014, and then with the help of McDonald's, they had a bit of a pilot project to try and set up a system for coming up with indicators that would identify a farm's sustainability and where they are on that continuous improvement metrics kind of thing. Then there was a Cargill acceleration program. And
Cargill is the wholesaler in between the farmers and the retailers.
Yeah, so they are one of our largest beef purchasing companies, and then that's where our packing plant is. And so they're purchasing those cattle that are coming through our sustainability program, and then they've actually figured out a way to send an incentive back to every farm that has handled cattle through that sustainable supply chain. And so the money from the customer really comes to go back to the farmer. And when I say customer, I mean McDonald's in this case. They're not adding a premium to the hamburger.
No, the price stays the same for the Big Mac, yeah.
Yes.
And so at your own level as a farmer, what do you have to do to enter this and to benefit from this payment?
Yeah, so there's an audit process. So as I mentioned, we've developed a number of different indicators that cover everything from, the environment. Do you keep your wetlands? How do you protect your water? How do you protect your grass on your farm? To animal welfare and food safety standards and things like that. So a whole gamut of indicators. And so they have a bit of a prep that you can do to look through to see where you think you stand, but then ultimately there'll be an auditor that comes out on your farm, and you can walk them through each of those indicators and show how you are achieving or working towards those goals. And so then and that's really it.
So do you essentially get this payment back from the retailers because you've entered the program and you're trying, or do you actually have to show results before you get anything back?
So once you're in the program, then the trick with the incentive coming back to you is that it's kind of a little bit of luck, because as that animal moves through the supply chain, in order for them to be considered sustainable at the end, every site that they move through must have been audited. So, for example, myself, I've been audited. I'm a verified sustainable producer, but none of my cattle made it all the way through the value chain. So
because your finisher wasn't necessarily accredited or anything like that.
Exactly, and I'm not sure where they fell out, but at some point hands touched them that hadn't been audited, and so therefore we can't call that meat then verified sustainable through the whole supply chain.
Okay, but if all the links in the chain are in the program, as long as they're committing to it, then it's acceptable and you can get the money back.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of animals that have gone through operations that have been audited, but maybe they just didn't go through an entire supply chain with that. So that is an area that we could really improve on, and some strides that we need to take now is how do we communicate between those operations so that we can get a pathway through the system where we have less animals falling out.
And what kind of money are we talking about for an animal that is actually gone through the whole system? How much is going back to the farmers?
Well, so they reassess that every quarter based on how many animals made it through. And I think it was anywhere from $10 to I think as high as $18 per head. So that's dependent on as they each quarter they reassess.
Okay, so $18 Canadian dollars, not actual money, not just a symbolic payment. It would actually make a difference.
Yes, even the $10 per head, a $10 per head premium would be awesome. Yeah.
Canadian farmer Christine Tapley there. Staying on the current crisis affecting beef farmers, the IFA held a meeting this week that invited farmers to Nenagh to discuss the situation. I spoke to North Tipperary IFA Chair Imelda Walsh after the meeting about the current mood among farmers.
Farmers are very frustrated, Hannah, and rightly so. I suppose it's been an extremely difficult year for all farming sectors, but in particular for the livestock sector. They're a very low-income sector, and they're really feeling the pressure of price, continued low price, and prices been quite low all this year.
There were, I'd say, over 100 farmers in the room. I mean, what was the feedback? Were they concerned about budget? Were they concerned about cap? What did they say?
Both. I think there was a lot of disappointment. While the acknowledgement that we'd got 43 million in the budget, I think a lot of farmers were disappointed with the €40. It was a long ways off from the 200 that we had actively sought for, saying that. While they accepted it was a step in the right direction, a lot more needs to be done. And there's a feeling out there that at the government level in some way that there's nearly a desire to get rid of the suckler herd. We all appreciate the suckler herd is an integral part of rural Ireland and needs to be preserved.
And Tipperary itself, you said it was a hard year. How's Tipperary now at the minute coping? How are farmers coping?
Farmers, I suppose there's a lot of bills hanging over from this year, Hannah. It's been an extremely expensive year for all sectors. Further-wise, a lot of supplies have been replenished in the last couple of weeks. It's been absolutely fantastic back into the year, which has been great. And I suppose we had a further and financial here about 5 weeks ago, Hannah, and at that stage the situation was far more dire. Farmers were a lot more concerned. Since that, a lot of that has been alleviated. There's not, I would say, there might have been a 40-50% deficit for some farmers. That's possibly down now between 10 and 20, in particular here in North Tipperary. I do appreciate our counterparts in South Tipperary have probably greater deficits.
And I suppose the beef crisis meeting today, it was meant to come up with some solutions. I mean, were there any solutions, or what do you see as the step forward now for beef farmers?
I suppose tonight was in that we spoke quite a bit on producer organisations, and we'd Miss Valerie Woods here from the department speaking on that. Mixed views from the audience in relation to it. We gave it a good debate, and would it have a role in addressing some of the issues? It's one tool. There are others, numerous other ones also within that. Obviously the cap has a huge part to play within that, and with those negotiations well underway within that. Obviously, Hannah, that the cap budget has to be increased. I know they're talking about at best maintaining it, but we've got to appreciate when we started getting single farm payment initially, we're saying that it was in line with decreased prices of stock to allow the consumer to have cheaper food. But unfortunately, the BPS has eroded, and unfortunately everything as our inputs have increased, we're saying that to the point that livestock farmers are finding it extremely difficult to make a viable living, and if it wasn't for their partner or their spouse working off farm, those families would not survive.
Imelda Walsh there. It's perhaps as a result of this continued frustration of beef prices that an underground beef plan movement has been formed by a group of farmers in Meath using the messaging service WhatsApp. The group has grown from 300 to over 1,200 members in just a matter of months, and I spoke to one of the organisers, Eamon Corley, about his vision for the group.
We're calling it a beef plan movement, and the idea behind it is to unite as many farmers as possible involved in the beef industry, and to get them to work together to take control of the animal from birth to slaughter and beyond.
And what gave you this idea? What was the impetus behind it? Was it a couple of people around you or what?
Well, I've been involved in a producer organisation since for the last 3 years, and it has also been a purchasing organisation where we purchase our inputs as well as selling our outputs. And we've always been conscious of the raw deal we're getting for our produce, and also of the big price that we're paying for our inputs. And it's basically because we've been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed over a period of a good few years, to the point that suckler farming and beef farming is at this moment in time unsustainable. There's not a cost of production price plus a margin available, and we think there should be. What we intend doing is we intend setting up a beef plan, a beef plan group for every county in Ireland, and that beef plan group will become a purchasing group and will become a producer group, and there will be huge benefits from the farmer. Those producer groups can form part of an amalgamation of producer groups, and they can have a lot of bargaining power.
It doesn't sound too complicated. It doesn't sound like there might be a weak link in the chain and that farmers, as was mentioned at the meeting inside, could become tempted by, say, processors who would be willing to offer individual farmers, say, 10 cent per kilo more one week.
Yeah, we've had that problem in our own producer group. And the nature of the beast is that factories don't like producer organisations, and they will try and split them up. And in our own producer organisation, we explained that to farmers before we started, because we talked to other producer organisations who experienced the same problem. But if the farmer thinks of it like this, they know that the factory will come after them and try and split the group. And if they're strong-minded enough, that will be even a greater incentive for those farmers to stick together, because when farmers stick together, they will get more money. They will be more powerful. And that's what we think. If the right message is given to farmers, they will realise that. And it has happened in our group that farmers have been offered more money, but they've stuck with us. And on the average for the year, they actually work out better.
How many farmers are in your producer group, if you don't mind me asking?
Our producer organisation has about 75 farmers, and then we have 150 farmers in a purchasing group. And
to go back to this beef plan that you have at the minute, I mean, you have how many farmers are you contacting through kind of WhatsApp or social media? Do you know at the minute? Yeah,
we have 1,200. It's grown from about 300 farmers about a month ago to today. It's at 1,200.
And do you think
we believe that most of the breed societies are coming on board, which could be thousands more.
And do you think the farmers are genuinely serious, or, you know, just to play devil's advocate, do you think that they're frustrated and perhaps feeling isolated, and that WhatsApp is a way to vent their frustration, but they wouldn't actually do anything? Do you think they actually will come together?
Yeah, I think farmers will come together. Like, this plan was put together through using WhatsApp, where the problems were presented and solutions were found, and they were put into a workable plan in a structured way that has the capabilities of delivering results. And what it does is, when you write something down on paper and you have a plan, people can buy into it. They can look at it and satisfy themselves, and they can come to the opinion that will work for them.
And is now going forward, are you planning on unrolling it? I mean, how could farmers get in touch if they wanted to? Is it going to expand even further?
Yes, we're starting a nationwide campaign to roll out this plan to every farmer in the country. We have a contact person for every county in Ireland. We're going to do a drive through the marts. Marts have rang me up and offered our group a 10-minute slot at peak time in the marts on the peak day. Inundated with calls from marts, because marts see that the suckler farmer is diminishing and it affects their business. So there's going to be a nationwide campaign. We have a full list of county contact numbers, and people will be given the opportunity to physically sign up to this plan and to become a subscriber for this plan.
Eamon Corley there. And for farmers wanting to find out more about the group, they can find them on Facebook. Well, stay tuned, because still to come we have a stark farm income warning from Teagasc and opportunities in agri-tourism.
Farmers fall foul of inspections. In this week's Irish Farmers Journal, we reveal a 60% surge in penalties as a result of inspections. Farm incomes hit 8-year low, with 30% drop across all sectors. Farmers to receive €2.7 million from fodder scheme. We reveal that Angus at the top breed for second year running, with registrations up 50% in 5 years. And in Irish Country Living, can brittle bones be rebuilt? Learn how to identify and combat osteoporosis. Inside this week's Irish Farmers Journal, on sale today.
2018 will be known as the year of snow, storms and sun hot enough to burn up half the farmland in Ireland. But to compound what has been a truly awful year, Teagasc have added fuel to the fire of hate we harbour for 2018 and stated that farm incomes are due for a severe hit. As if they couldn't have gotten any worse, I hear you mutter. Well, Teagasc economist Fiona Thorne spoke to Thomas Hubert about the organisation's findings.
Now, this is Thomas Hubert, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. We're at the Old Tech One Ideas Forum in Dunboyne, County Meath, and I'm here with Fiona Thorne, economist at Teagasc. You gave a presentation here, Fiona, about the trends for Irish farming, especially on incomes. And I suppose I'd like to start by asking you about incomes for this year. You've done more recent forecasts and estimates of how things are looking. What did you find?
Okay. Unfortunately, Thomas, the story that we have on income levels for 2018 isn't a very positive news story, and it really is consistent across all the sectors. But I suppose what we need to remember is the high base that we were coming off in 2017 for dairy in particular. And really it is the dairy story that has been masking what's been going on in some of the other sectors when we talk about average family farm income in recent times. So in 2017 was a phenomenal year for Irish dairy, where we had an average family farm income of over €86,000. But unfortunately, when we fast forward then into the present day to 2018, it's been a negative news story in terms of cost of production and milk output value. So what that means for our Irish farmers and at the farm gate is that we're looking at declines in family farm income across dairy, beef, sheep and cereals. But it is quite a stark reality when you look at a drop from 86,000 in dairy farms down to over 45,000 is the estimate that we're talking about at the moment. But I suppose what we really need to remember and reiterate at this stage, that is very provisional figure at this time of the year, and Teagasc economists, we produce the first real hard estimate of income for 2018 at our Outlook conference in December. So I'd say watch this space for our first full estimate in early December, Thomas.
And on the longer term trends, you looked at the past years and the coming years as well, and you said, I think one thing that stuck with me is farmers have to run faster to stand still. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So Thomas, I think if I was an agricultural economist standing here at an All Tech One Ideas conference 20, 30 years ago, I would have been saying the same message. It's not a new news story in any respect that farmers have to run faster to stay still, but it is very stark when we look at the growth in output value, which is stemming post-quote on the dairy side. We are seeing substantial gains in output value, but what we're also seeing happening is that low-hanging fruit on the dairy side, we've probably exploited a lot of that now at this stage, and we are going to be looking at increases in input going forward into the future. So even though we are looking at large gains on the output side, inputs are also rising in price terms and in expenditure terms, which means even though we are looking at projections for increases in income out to the year 2030, they're not very, very substantial.
Apart from input costs, you're looking at other factors affecting farmers' incomes. What are they? How do you see them evolve?
Yeah, okay, so on the input side, I was explaining that what will happen on total input costs, you'll have some of it coming from input prices, but also some of it coming from the volume of inputs that's used in any one year. Now, the case in point in that is 2018, where we had the weather conditions, which meant that at the moment we're estimating that costs on a cent per litre for dairy farms will increase by about 6 cents a litre, which is very, very large. But a lot of that coming from the expenditure side because of the drought conditions and the harsh winter that we've had. So you have to remember that it's not just coming from what's happening on the price side, but also on the volume side to give you a total expenditure change.
And finally, maybe some policy aspects and the importance of farm payments to farmers is very large, especially the dry stock sector. How do you see that evolving?
Absolutely. So the point that I was making at the presentation this morning is that we really have a world of two halves in Irish agriculture now, with dairy farm incomes far surpassing incomes in any other sector, and especially the dry stock sector, the beef sector. We don't see that changing anything dramatically in the future, and actually the European Commission are projecting that beef production at a European level will decline out to the end of the production period by 2030, and that's really just to do with economics and the profitability within the sector, but also some demand factors coming into play as well. So support payments are going to continue to be crucial for our beef sector into the future, and that was reiterated by the budget that we had in Ireland last week, where we see support, additional coupled support for the beef sector.
Fiona Thorne there. Keeping on the Teagasc train and on a slightly more positive note, our correspondent Barry Cassidy spoke to Barry Caslin, Rural Development Specialist with Teagasc, about the opportunities agri-tourism can offer to low-income farms to diversify their revenue streams.
Yeah, well, we heard from a lot of speakers today from the whole food agri-tourism side about the potential for farmers to engage in tourism initiatives. We know that right across the country farm incomes are quite low and they're hit, especially in the sectors such as sheep, beef, those sectors, and those farmers are looking for alternative incomes. Now, we're talking about diversification, and diversification isn't for everybody. If 1% of the farmers diversify, that might be the height of it, but it's all down to being exposed to the ideas. So sometimes if you go to a country or you hear ideas from different places, you say, maybe I could do that. And it mightn't be the farmer themselves, it might be a family member, it might be a son or a daughter. And as Pádraig Giblin said today, he says the worst thing he sees is a young parent saying goodbye to a son or a daughter, heading off to Australia or emigrating because they can't find work or they can't do something with the land or make it a decent living of it. But I think we heard an awful lot of opportunities today, Barry, about where farmers could engage in the whole area of tourism. They own a fantastic asset, they own land. Very often it's beside a river, very often it's beside a lake, beside a mountain area, in a very scenic part of Ireland, which we underestimate and we undervalue. So it's really looking at those assets and saying, what can I do in order to diversify income, maybe to engage a family member who might be interested in some area of development. Now, it might be in the area of accommodation provision, and we heard examples of Leader here today who fund diversification projects in terms of accommodation provision and restoration of old farmhouses. It might be in the area of activities on the farm. It might be, for example, providing kayaking facilities like we heard in Ruski and Roscommon from Tommy Gaffney, Shannon River Adventures. It might be providing boats for fishermen to go on the lakes. And again, we heard that there's funding available from the likes of Inland Fisheries Ireland if you want to develop slipways onto lakes, purchase fishing boats, develop a marina, and there's so many opportunities that we heard about today. There's a lot of courses available there as well from the likes of the local enterprise offices, start your own business type courses. Chagas provide courses in terms of new product development. We run the options courses as well, where farmers can get exposed to ideas in terms of tourism, how they can go about marketing, social media, networking opportunities, how they can go about starting up a new venture and promoting themselves. I think the biggest challenge is we're probably all good, Barry, in certain areas, but it's looking at the areas we're not so good in and seeing where do we need the expertise.
Yeah, I suppose that's just striking even from this conversation, just the depth of options you mentioned there, kayaking, canoeing, there's any amount of things. It's just maybe a matter of looking around you, seeing what's there and maybe tapping into something that, that other people mightn't see, but you see every day and maybe you become accustomed to it now at this point. Yeah,
very often it's the fear of the unknown. I don't know that business. But as I mentioned, it could be a flight to some other country to see what somebody else is doing. It might be going to the other part of Ireland to see what somebody else is doing in that area. How they manage their business, even partaking. I
suppose maybe just one last one to mention. What you talk about sounds quite hands-on, but there is also options there for people. Might be saying, I produce a great product, I make great milk, I sell great meat. Maybe there's just a chance to capitalise that in an artisan way and maybe connect up with a local restaurant or maybe sell direct, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So many farmers, they have the potential to produce their own beef, but I suppose it comes down to the whole area of added value. They traditionally bring them to the mart. They produce they produce milk, but they don't produce any added value, so they're not producing the cheese. But we've heard from today of various people that do that, whether it's from goats or whether it's from sheep. They're producing a cheese product, an ice cream product, it could be a bread product, and there's loads of artisan producers right across Ireland, and I think it's a fantastic network of them. It's exposing that idea to more and more people that you can actually produce this yourself on your farm. You can potentially add value. There's various options of marketing that. It can be, as you mentioned, direct selling from the house itself, from the farm itself. Online has opened up rural areas, Barry, enormously over the last 10 years. Rural Ireland has been opened up to a whole vast worldwide market that it never was open to before. If you're going on a holiday yourself, you probably go on TripAdvisor, you probably look at the web to see what is that hotel like, what is that area like, what can I do in that area. And I think there's so many opportunities here in terms of marketing, whether it's drone footage of an area, drone footage of a farm. We have to be looking at being innovative with our assets, with our farms, and saying, right, how can I market this farm to its best potential, this accommodation to its best potential? How can we make a unique selling point about our assets?
Barry Castellan there of Chagas. Now, the Women in Agriculture Conference is taking place in Kerry this year, and tickets have sold out in record time. Ahead of her talk next week at the Women in Agriculture Conference, Bríd Corkery, 18-time All-Ireland Camogie medal winner, speaks to Irish Country Living journalist Anne O'Donoghue about returning to camogie after having her baby Tig and her love of dairy farming.
So I suppose in 2016, I had a break in 2017. 2016, I just didn't enjoy the year as much as I had other years. I felt I was always coming home and I was cranky about something, and I always said I'd finish up when I didn't enjoy it. No, I suppose Inniscarra won the county then in 2016, and I was saying, geez, should I go back? And I remember talking to Rena whether she'd go back or not. And so in the middle of 2017, I'd made up my mind, that because I suppose Polly Murray had been on to me about going back and stuff. And I'd made up my mind that I'd go back. That was a Thursday, and I had to ring Polly Murray on the Monday to tell him I'm out. I didn't give the specifics, but Tig was in the oven. Yeah. So
then you kind of put it on the back burner for a year, kind of. Did you, or did you kind of put it out of your mind?
I put it out of my mind. I thought that was it. I was like, that was my inter-county career done. I was enjoying my year with club, really enjoying it. I was enjoying my more time to myself, and I never visualised myself coming back. Paddy Murray rang me in December of 2017, and he had gone back as a trainer, and he said, will you play next year? And I was like, Paddy, no. I was like, I have a young fella, and I have a young one on the way, and nobody knows what's going to happen. I was like, no, I'd say you might as well count me out. But he kept joking about it. And then I suppose in January, I will say, they went out to play their first league game, and I just got some sort of, I don't know, it was kind of a graw for it. I was like, God, I'd love to be playing. And then I was watching the footballers. They were playing in Crow Park as well. I was like, God, that's amazing. I'd love to be playing, but I still didn't think I would be going back. And then I suppose Paddy kept on to me. The one thing he said to me is, whatever you do, don't go under the knife. And I reckon he jinxed me, because that's what happened. So I suppose after it. But anyway, so I was dying to get fit. I think when you've put on weight and stuff, you want to try and get rid of it, and it was a good goal, and it was one way of doing it.
And then you kind of had great summer, and kind of was it hard managing him and training and matches and everything?
I suppose I put a lot on the side. When I did decide to go back to Cork, I was put on a strength and conditioning programme with Martin O'Brien, the strength and conditioning coach. So every day I would be doing something, and in the evening I'd be at club training or county training. So there was a lot of time put aside. Sometimes I'm like, God, it was such a nice summer, I should have done way more of it. But look, that's what it was. That was my choice I made, and I was very glad I did it. And I had a great summer with him. It was hard to get out the door. I had two brilliant nephews. They'd come training with me, and they'd mind him on the sideline.
So he'd come training with you as well?
Yeah, so he'd go most evenings, and the boys just mind him on the sideline. So
he'd be well used to it.
He's well used to it. And whoever's injured on the sideline would look after him and stuff. So it was great. Well, I suppose I was born into a dairy farm. I always loved it. Always up the yard, always milking. Dermot came from Kool-Aid, beef farmer. I suppose he only milked the cows with me a couple of times at home, but we moved to, we did a year's travelling. We went to New Zealand and Australia, and we just started milking cows there. And in New Zealand, he loved it.
Did he?
He really learnt an awful lot in New Zealand. And when he came home, he said, I want to go farming. So he was very lucky. Someone knew someone, and that brought us back to Mike Bateman in Crookstown, and he started there as just for a couple of months as a calf for the calving season in 2011, and he's there since. So
how many are you milking? Are you in partnership at the moment?
So we're in partnership at the moment with Mike. They're milking 600, just over 600 cows.
Jesus, that's a big desk in the morning.
So I suppose I was there up to last June, and then I went with the bank. Just there was the option was there, so I just took it, in the fact that if I didn't like it, I could always walk away. and say I tried it, rather than 2 years down the road saying we should have tried it, and so. But I think in the future, I think I'll be back farming.
Breach Corkery there, speaking to Anne O'Donoghue. And that's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in, and remember you can keep up to date on all our social media channels or by reading that old-fashioned thing called a newspaper. The sound engineer this week was Ferdy Mooney, and I'm Hannah Quinn Mulligan.
We hope you enjoyed this week's Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Martbids. Download the Martbids app now and see what you're missing. The cattle aren't free, but the app is. Martbids. Trade safer. Trade smarter.